Not here yet. No, she's gonna, oh, there we go. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
All right, so the live stream is up. We are going up live to YouTube.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to call the meeting to order for this evening. It is the 11th of January, 2022 at 7:02 in the evening. And if we could all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And this evening we have myself, First Selectman Tara Carr, Selectman Harry Shaker here present, and on Zoom is our other Selectman, Steve Dunn. Can everybody on Zoom hear us?
I can.
Great. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and break off into executive session. I'd like to recommend a motion that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session to discuss the police chief position.
So moved.
Can I get a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So
Okay,
at
you
this
still
time,
have people, you've got to put people in a waiting room.
Yep.
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah. Is it just you guys and Steve, or do we pull anybody else that's online?
I've invited Zoltan to stay and John Puglisi.
All right, so John, I'm pulling you into the breakout room as well.
You do have to put that in the minutes, who else you invited into the executive.
Yep, Ginny's on. Ginny, I think, Ginny? Is that clear, Ginny? Just want to make sure she's got everybody in the room from the police commission.
What did, try that, or shoe act tomorrow. Yeah.
Oh, Betsy?
I couldn't remember.
Betsy is unforgettable. And Alex is
Yeah.
unforgettable.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know your name.
All right, we're back on public.
Okay, we're back on.
Okay.
All right.
John Morris was on the for a while, right? Did he just?
Okay, if I could have everybody's attention, please. We're back into our regular session of the special session and out of executive session. So the next order of business for the evening would be to make a motion to appoint. We're still recording.
Yep, that was Ginny coming back in.
So I'd like to make a motion to appoint John G. Puglisi as Chief of Police for the town of Brookfield, effective 1 February 2022. This is notwithstanding the educational requirements, and the Board of Selectmen is aware of the educational requirements, and they will be waived. The Police Commission and the Board of Selectmen are accepting of the waiver. Can I get a second for this motion?
I'll second that.
I think you're muted, Steve. Any discussion?
No,
I just want to make a statement that it was a unanimous decision with the commission, and we welcome you and look forward to leading us in law enforcement over the next few years. Welcome.
yeah. I think John is an excellent choice. I think the police commission did a very, very good job on vetting this process, and I look forward to having John as our chief of police for a long time. I think he's absolutely the best choice for this position.
I would absolutely concur with both Harry and Steve, and I think the town of Brookfield's very lucky to have John, and I look forward to seeing what great things he and his team will continue to do for the town and keeping us all safe and well protected. So welcome aboard, John, and I look forward to working with you.
Do we have an actual vote? We had a motion and a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And that's 3-0. So round of applause. Congratulations, John.
Thank you very much.
So,
Tara, I'd also like to just thank Jay
Yeah.
from the Board of Selectmen. Thank him for all his hard work and dedication and what he just has done for the town and led us in that field, and just enjoy retirement, although I'm sure he'll be very busy. But thank you, Jay.
absolutely. 38 years is quite commendable. So time for him to enjoy retirement. But okay, so on to the next item for the evening is the purpose of the library study and the scope of work that was written up for the allocation of that $30,000. So thank you to all affiliated with the library project, and for those of you who aren't here for the library, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you'd like to leave, please feel free to do so. And this is just an open discussion and conversation, and for the sake of the recording, I'd like to ask that you guys try to move closer to the microphone if you're comfortable with that.
If you are going to speak, you need to be at the microphone so that people can hear you, because it is an open meeting to the public.
Name and address.
Yep.
Name and address.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd like for this to be more of a conversation, a discussion. There's kind of a lot out there that we're looking to get answers to, and
Can we get the nature of your objection or your concern? That would help kind of all of us kind of round off that discussion.
yeah. So when the week before I officially took office, I had met with Mary Knox at Parks and Rec, and the following day I met with Tracy. And in my conversations with all of the department heads, I was trying to figure out what their needs were and you know, if the sky were the limit, what would they want for their department? And in my meeting with Mary first, you know, she had mentioned to me that there was a need for more Parks and Rec space. Fine, you know, if I hit the Powerball, I'd love to give that to her. And then the very next day, I sat down with Tracy, and in her office, she has this beautiful picture of what she would wish for would be a beautiful brand-new library facility. And in the conversation, she had mentioned to me the $30,000 allocation for a study of Center School to be repurposed as a library. And I said to her, wow, okay, because I found it interesting that I said, does it incorporate Parks and Rec at all? And I explained to her the day previous I had sat down with Mary, and she said, no, this is just for a library study. And that very day I came back to Town Hall, Steve Dunn was at the coffee maker, and I said, hey, Steve, what's with this $30,000 for the new library? And he told me that he wasn't aware that it was solely for the library. I think that was on like a Thursday, or it could have, a Wednesday or Thursday of that week before I got sworn in. And then I came to work on Monday, and life moved on, and eventually Betsy and Christina came into my office, which I was very grateful for, because they gave me all the background on the library and walked me through the story, where we are, where we've come from, where we were on the 21st when we met, and then moving forward to the interviews, which just reiterated what Tracy had told me was coming down the pike. So fast forward to last week, and when it came to my attention that the interviews were supposed to happen today, it just piqued my interest, because I saw the RFP, and the RFP didn't match what had been explained to me by Betsy and Christina. So essentially the RFP doesn't match what I thought the scope of the work was supposed to incorporate.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah. Take it. Paul Checo, 29 Dorset Lane, chairperson of the Municipal Building Committee.
Microphone on?
Paul Checo, 29 Dorset Lane, chairperson of the Municipal Building Committee. So when the library committee first came to the MDC meeting, we were asked about a library study. So we authored the RFP based on some information we received. I understand now that it doesn't match what, you know, the intention of the town was or what the expectation was. However, it is a qualification-based election. So I'm a firm believer, never come to a place with a problem that you don't have a solution to. So we have gone through, and I have heard a couple of different iterations, but ultimately, this is a professional service, and it's a qualification-based election. So we did do a shortlist process, the members of the NBC, members of the library committee, based upon qualifications, and those 4 shortlist firms were the ones who were to be interviewed this evening. With that, I would say, and the proposal does say we can go out with an addenda if the town opts to change up services. And I would say we issue an addenda to those 4 firms that we've already shortlisted.
I lost the sound.
Should be open now.
Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Good,
Right.
okay. Paul, I am aware, thank you. The information that I got is not that it is in the Historical Society, but that it is listed with the state.
It's not.
But I just want to know why
No, I know why, and
Be-
that's why we actually looked it up, because my understanding from all these years on Board of Ed with you, Harry, you know, and everybody propagating the center as a historic building, because
Right.
it's the oldest wooden
building, yes,
in continuous
yeah.
operation in the state of Connecticut, which, look, if you look at modern day school buildings, I don't know if that's something to be proud of or not be proud of, but, you know, that's the history of Brookfield. So that was always propagated, that center was historic.
Okay,
Now, that's why we took the time to look it up, because we needed to be sure what we're dealing with. And so what we're dealing with is an old wooden school building that had multiple additions. The original Center Elementary School apparently was the HEVCO building. The original portion of it, that's actually on Wiskinger Road, on that corner.
mhm,
The addition was done later on. It's actually all listed in the application that we
right,
presented to the National Register. And the only reason why the state of Connecticut picked it up was because it was on the National Register. Now, that being stated, even if it were a historic building on the National Register, that doesn't preclude you from doing any work to the building or changing that building in any way. The only thing that happens if you modify that building, if it were on the historic register, would be that you would lose that place on the historic register.
Right.
If the modifications were such that it changed the nature of the building.
right,
So there's no,
yeah, thank you.
And
there's no deficit to be had if you were to change that building unless you receive federal funding for it.
The concern that I had with the situation was that when I read the PDF, PDQ, whatever letter you want to use,
RFP?
or RFD, RFQ, or RFD,
Yes, you
whatever.
got it.
To me, it looked like it was a study for the library.
You're absolutely correct. It was.
And in the intent, when we started the talks about the study, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, was that it was going to be a three-stage, three options. One would be, first off, we wanted to know, what can we do with the school once it's vacant? Can we use it for a library? I think the option two is a library and possibly a park and rec / community center, which would make sense with the gym and the cafeteria. And the third, I believe, was to possibly build a library with leaving space and room for municipal use. It was three options. So my question was, how did we get from three options down to you being requested to make?
Well, again, it could have been a misunderstanding on our part. You know, over the course of doing this, we've been on Zoom, we've been masked at meetings, we haven't had a lot of dialogue back and forth. You know, information's been limited, and this has been a difficult time to communicate, especially, you know, last year when you originally came to us, it was like August or September. We haven't quite gone back to in person. So, look, it could have been a miscommunication on our part. There's a number of reasons. But again, the path forward is what I'm most interested in here tonight. Can we look at what you want to do, put it in an addendum, get it out to the 4 shortlisted firms, and kind of revamp this process without having to reinvent it.
Okay.
And that's what we're asking.
My other concern is that I didn't know until last week that there was a line item for the 23 budget for $125,000 design study. Now, I talked to many people who didn't know, in town hall, with the Board of Education.
But that hasn't been approved yet, that's just a request.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I didn't even know it was going to be a request. I mean, I would have thought I would have possibly heard that. In my estimation, there's absolutely no way that we're in a position in 23 to make a $125,000 appropriation for another study. We've got an $8 million, or just south of the $7 million communication package that we're doing with the police. That's going to need I believe it's going to need a command center with it. And what is the value, and there may be value, but what is the value of going ahead with a $30,000 study, which, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to give us a whole lot more information than what we have here in town of what we can do with it. But if it's going to be 3 or 4 years before we take that next step, is that a waste of $30,000?
Well, that's a good question, but I think the library board is probably better suited to respond to the question.
Sure.
They don't give the NBC any budget. All right, we get $0. So, we're just a facilitator of a process. If somebody from the library committee wants to get up and answer the questions, I would gladly yield.
Temporarily, at least.
Oh, yeah.
Betsy McElvain, 127 Long Meadow Hill. I am chairman of the library board. And, yes, Terry, I think there is a proceeding with this $30,000 study is important. It will never be a waste of money. What we expect to get out of it is 3 possible options, or if the architects can come up with it. Basically, it addresses the needs for the 40,000 square feet that the library wanted to occupy. So what we're asking to do is, should we tear down the building totally, start over from scratch? You will recall when the Board of Ed came up with their options, they said that's the best option because it gives them most flexibility in doing the design. Should we just renovate the parts that the library would occupy by essentially taking everything out except the walls, and I'm including windows, doors, everything, because that clears the space and gives us as close to build-new as possible. The other is to do it partway. Leave the older parts, in particular, because that's where the gym and the classrooms are that Parks and Rec were interested in, and tear down everything else and build a new library and make the 2 buildings the same. So looking at it, having them say which option they think is better, and having the library board, the new library committee, looking at reports that come back from this study, guides us into our next iteration of, okay, now we know how we ought to do this. Now we need to get an architect at some point to come back in and start designing a library in those qualifications.
Thank you.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I understand. Again, my thought is, I don't want to say I would assume, but I would think that they could come up with a final study that says, yes, you could put just the library there, or any one building, one facility there. Yes, you can do a library and do a park and rec, like, you're going to have to figure out how to do it. I'm confused as to why we're paying $30,000, and I could be wrong, Paul. I'm confused as to why we're spending $30,000 when we have most of the. I'm just not seeing the value, and if there is real value, then I will be all for it. I just don't see it.
Josh Flowers, 7 Dorset Lane. I understand what you're saying, which is basically, hey, we kind of know the end game, we know the solution.
Right.
To do any of the above, why do we need to do it, right? So, taking the library aside right now, I'm going to speak to answer that question as a whole. This is what we do for a living. Same reason we did it for the schools. We knew we could put an addition on Huckleberry. We knew that we could tear down the portables at Wisconsin. What we don't know and didn't know is all the intrinsic values of each school, what we would have had to update, what we would have spent more money on, and what is the end game. So our goal always is to get the best dollar value for our client. Sometimes maybe that means spending a little bit more, but if you're getting inherently a lot more for what you spend and getting a better cost per dollar, fantastic, rather than dumping money into something just to do it because it's an easy solution. The end game might not pan out as well. We've seen that with other projects in town over the years. So that's why, in general speak, some of these feasibility studies are more important because, especially with a larger project, if we just went with, okay, we need to renovate our schools, and we put out a $78 million bond to renovate schools, we would not get what we're going to be getting in this town, guaranteed, not even close.
Okay.
So that's why kind of doing some of these studies to see exactly what we need to put into our existing infrastructure would cost versus going new versus reprogramming, repurposing. What do we do with vacant buildings, as an example? So if the library moved, what do we do with that building? If Parks and Rec's office is moved, now the Tesco building's empty. So there's a lot of other pieces on the board that are in play, and hiring a professional to organize those for us and put a cost dollar value to what we get at the end of the day is why we pay for those services.
And will that be part of the service?
Yeah.
What to do with,
Well, to Paul's point, it very well could be.
Okay.
And that's where this RFP can be fluid. Again, it was only focused on the library because that was our understanding. But when we come back to them, we can say, hey, we need a, for lack of a better phrase, townwide study of our buildings, our structure, focusing on the library, focusing on Parks and Rec, focusing on, the curling club, whatever we want to throw in there. And that's where, they come to us with, okay, we've organized your thoughts, we've organized your problems, we're providing solutions, here you are, here are your options, here's the best dollar value to get you the most at the end of the day. That's what we're paying for.
and my last question is, if it was going to take 3 to 4 years for that next step, would this study still be, still be able to be used? In other words, is it going to be outdated? Is it going to be something that,
Absolutely, it'd still be used. The only caveat would be, our existing infrastructure. So, as an example, kids move out of center school, and let's say we don't touch that building at all, we turn off the heat and everything else. Well, it's not gonna be in the same condition 4 years from now, especially in that condition, than it is today.
right,
So, let's say the renovation option, which might have been more plausible, may not be further down the line because it's just that much older. But in short, from the organizational aspect and the program aspect,
right.
aside if some new wave Parks and Rec program comes out of the blue, or a new library program comes out of the blue, which is the new thing to do, absolutely it'd be feasible.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So just so it's clear where I'm coming from, again, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, obviously the town voted on the budget, the $30,000 is allocated for this. I just want it to be very clear, again, that what we're asking for matches the request. And now you're throwing other things out there, so maybe it was good that we postponed it, because there were questions and other things that could be addressed, so how were we going to go to interview when we don't even know what it is exactly we're looking at?
Well, originally we were going to interview because we were looking at a library study. So
it was intended only for the library.
Pardon?
It was intended
Well,
only.
that's exactly how the RFP reads, yeah.
So,
That was my understanding. Now,
okay.
again, that's, it could have been my misunderstanding. However, now that we're here and we're looking at this, let's come up with a scope together. Let's move forward. Wherever the next phase lands, let's take that off the table for the time being. As Josh said, we still will have to maintain that asset. Students are moving out, in the spring of '22 or in the spring of '23, whichever the date is. We still have to maintain that asset while it's sitting dormant. So, let's move forward and do this. We don't want to do the high school
Right,
overlay.
right.
We don't want to make that mistake again.
I understand.
Do that 20 years.
And so what we can do is if we want to add or we want to revise and, you know, what are we going to do with the existing library once we move, that type of thing? It would be a max of a 30,000, it would be a max at 30,000.
What we're going to do is cap the RFP and basically say, here's the proposal, you have the proposal number, these are the services we want as far as the studies.
Right,
You tell us now what you can give us.
for 30,000.
Under that umbrella.
Right.
And that's going to be the negotiation point. And that's going to be the subject of those interviews.
So it would be a $30,000 max. Show us what you can give us. Here's our scope. Show us what you can give us for 30,000.
Yeah, show us the services.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
Sure, Steve.
Yeah, Harry makes a very good point in that, and so does Tara, that there was some confusion on this, and Harry and I at the last Board of Selectmen meeting agreed that our recollection was that this was to look at the center school as an entirety, as a building, and to understand what it really needs to be used for any of the purposes that we had. We know that Tecton did an initial survey for us when we had built the new school a couple years before that. Remember, they went through every single school, looked at them and said, okay, this is 40 years old. You're going to want to do this. You're going to want to do that. But I think this study would give us a much better grounding as to exactly the condition of this building and what it's suited for along those three lines of things that you discussed, Harry. You know, library and parks, rec, take it down, build a new building, which would be most cost effective, and just give us a general direction that we can follow in the next couple of years as we move forward on our capital projects.
Yeah, and $30,000 is not a lot of money, we all know that, but for the town of Brookfield, it is a lot of money because we have a lot of needs. And, you know, are we spending it most wisely at this juncture? You know, let's say we move forward with the study. My biggest fear is that we go into a holding pattern for, say, 2 years or 3 years, however long, and then we have to spend another $30,000 to relook at it for something else. It's just, I don't want to spend money for the sake of spending money unless it's being spent very wisely.
I agree. Look, and all of us here are taxpayers as well as residents and volunteers. And what I can say to that is at least the information would still be valid. And in thinking about this after our conversation and listening to Josh, we would have to do this process, whether it's now or 20 years from now.
Yeah.
The money's been appropriated for it, so that would, and it's a very small portion of overall architectural services. So pre-bond, you have 3 phases. There's feasibility, there's master planning, there's pre-bond, pre-referendum services. This is a very small portion of the feasibility at this point. We're not even into the master plan or the pre-referendum services. So, and then post-bond, obviously, we have everything through construction administration. So this is a very, very small portion of overall architectural services that the town's going to eventually expend to renovate that building or repurpose that building, unless something else happens.
Jerry, standing up. The other beauty of it is, part of the RFP can be what may we need to do to keep these buildings online when they are not in use.
When they're dormant, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it could be a study of how to best plan any future expenses to make sure they don't just get dilapidated further. That could be part of this RFP.
Can I also, Betsy McElvain again, the suggestion that this study includes what would happen to either the current building the library currently occupies and or the building that Parks and Rec occupies. I think it's not appropriate to let outside architects recommend that those uses. I think the appointment of the Center School Reuse Ad Hoc Committee, which did a lot of the groundwork to say who needs space, if the library Parks and Rec moved to Center School, then you need, I think, from the Board of Selectmen to say, okay, we'll set up another committee to look at whatever properties we have because the townspeople are a better judge of recommending what to do with things. It's how much it's gonna cost is when you bring in professionals from the outside.
Right.
So I hope that will not stay or be put in as part of this RFP besides the extra cost that it would.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I actually would agree with you on that. However, to Paul's point before you got up again, Betsy, it would also be up to the townspeople to decide what we do with Center School, should it stay vacant for a period of time. So, you know.
Well, yes, it's a town-owned asset, and I guess I've never been really sure who makes the final decision, whether it's the Board of Selectmen, with the recommendation and input from.
Well, we would get the design study, we would put it together, we would get, it would go to a referendum, and then the town would decide whether that's what we're gonna do or not. I would assume.
That's the way I kind of see this unfolding is, we would do the study for the library and other purposes at Center School. Recommendation comes back to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen then makes a recommendation on whether they want to put together an ad hoc committee, or they want the library to move forward, or the library Parks and Rec. That decision ultimately comes from the Board of Selectmen in the future, based upon the recommendations of both the library committee and the NBC. We can only gather the information and present it here unless some make the final determination.
But the final determination actually winds up being the townspeople who vote in a referendum to spend the money. So it goes
where does that
from
process
here.
start?
It starts, with the library board, then the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and then the townspeople.
So the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance are the ones who ultimately will make a decision on whether or not they're going to put this up for referendum. We can't, as the NBC, you can't, as a library committee, hold a referendum. Ultimately, that decision comes from here.
Yes.
Yeah, and are you hearing all this, Steve?
Yeah,
So, I just want to make sure, the Betsy and Christina provided me with this handy dandy little timeline here.
Yes.
And, it just begs the question, what happens next once this $30,000 is spent? Because there's a lot more to it than just snapping our fingers and having a library after we get the study done.
Well, that's
why it's years in the future.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's why there's a phase 2 and a phase 3.
And that's also why it's very concerning that we're not looking at it as it currently stands as an all-encompassing type of a study.
Well,
And it specifically says library study.
Yeah, but it is on the 10-year capital plan, because that's where this timeline comes from. So as the 10-year capital plan evolves, then it is, there is everything. That's why the $125,000 that we put in for a request is on there. There is time down the line for when we know that high school bonds get paid off, which does something for the town's ability to take on other obligations.
Eventually.
Yeah, 2026. Yeah. Well,
We have 3 more years, right, Paul, on the high school? 3 to 4?
I don't recall. I've been here way too long, that's all I know. I'm counting and doing it.
I was thinking, we did talk about it, and so I'm sure this is based on that, but I can't remember. I thought it was 2027.
Yeah, I believe it's 3 or 4 more years.
yeah, but and that's really where that timeline comes from, is from what's on the 10-year capital plan for the town.
Right, and Harry,
Yeah.
Coming from doing the high school project, new elementary school, my professional experience, the time to actually spending money on a bond referendum is when you're a shovel in the ground. So even though you did a study, and even though you hired an architect and you had plans and you passed a referendum, and the townspeople said, hey, let's spend this money, and Steve can speak to this as well, you're not spending the money until the first shovel goes in the ground. So that you know, you have to look at that timeline and actually work backwards.
I was just gonna make a point, that timeline is based on the 10-year capital plan. It's not something we made up, you know, that's where it is in the town's 10-year capital plan, and then we work backwards. And I have to say, I'm sorry that there were all these miscommunications, and I'm glad that we're standing here tonight having a conversation about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for inviting us in.
And thanks for coming. There was a disconnect because after our conversation, I was like, okay.
100%.
So looking at it.
And I was looking at
holistically.
it, like I said, about, you know, we attached that Center School Ad Hoc Committee study.
That's not part of this, that's not part of the study, though.
Sent it to the architect. Yeah.
It is not gonna be part
It's
of.
not in the RFP, but
Not in the
here-
RFP.
that's why we're here today.
But
That's
again,
that's
see,
why
we're
we're
moving
here today.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I just don't wanna
and
hear
that's,
that
this
two
is
attachments.
nothing but a positive conversation,
I
you know?
understand that, but
Um,
the two attachments were not part of what they were gonna study. It was information on what was found by the ad hoc committee.
Okay, so what if we add those three pieces from the
That's
Center
what we're
School
gonna
Ad
do.
Hoc Committee?
That's what we're gonna do.
That's what I'd
So
like to
we add
see.
those three pieces
We're gonna do
as
what,
an addendum as
we're
well
going to
as
do
an-
what we were supposed to do in the beginning,
But
and make it
the
three.
Center
Well-
School Reuse Committee report is part of the RFP, so is the Tecton report.
Yeah, but I think, yeah,
We need to
let's talk about
define
the
scope of work
addendum.
better.
I think we
Yeah.
talk about the
That's what it
addendum.
Over the forthcoming week, we'll wordsmith the revision and the addendum. We'll send it to the Board of Selectmen for the review and approval. After such time that they review and approve it, you know, and it doesn't need to be a formal meeting, it could just be, yes, this is what we all agreed to. Then we'll send out the addendum to those firms, and we'll reschedule, reflect their financial proposals, and we'll reschedule the interviews.
Great.
All right?
Well,
And if all that can be done before the 7th of February, because that's our next Board of Selectmen meeting, that'd be fantastic. But again, I mean, I understand there's a process and procedure and time is important, but there's no emergency here.
No.
So, look, the $30,000 again has been allocated. I just want it to be very clear as to what the intent of the work is going to be, for the sake of Brookfield as a whole, not just for the library. And I just want, for the record, to make sure that something else is clear, because I thought you had mentioned there was $1 million grant that now may have been lost.
yes.
Yes.
And if we hang anything else other than the word library to an application for that grant, the grant is a no-go. Is that accurate?
We can reapply for that grant. Tracy Waking, our director, has been attending meetings about the grant process. So we are following up on it to see if we can get another $1 million, which is the upper limit of grants the state library can give out, unfortunately. But, so we can apply for that. It has to fit into whatever timeline we use, because if you
We can lose it
get the
again.
grant, we have 3 years to get the shovel in the ground, so we have to,
But I think the question is more about the
Yeah.
naming of the space. So my understanding is that the naming, that it has to be for a library. It can't be for,
Yeah.
like, a community center, right?
Could it be the library portion of the project?
Yeah.
If there's a project that's a greater project, it would be for the library.
Those would be questions that Tracy would have to bring to the state and get definitive
Yeah.
answers.
Oh, Tracy's there and she's unmuted.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes, this is something that,
go ahead.
this is something I asked the state library about, whether or not we can still qualify for this grant. If it's a combined library and community center, library parks and rec, I can reach out to the state library.
Okay.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
I just want to make sure that as we proceed and you move forward with this RFP, that, you know, we're saying the right thing, right? So if, like, for this, the first packet that Julian put together, it says, new Brookfield Library. It doesn't say library / anything else, so.
CMBC put it together, and again, that
Yeah.
was our understanding.
And I'm sure that they put it based on the line item in the
Right,
budget
right.
from last year, which was
I get it.
approved.
Uh-huh.
And that was a specific to a library study. And I can read that. When Center School becomes vacant, this is from last year's budget, the capital item. When Center School becomes vacant in the fall of 2022 due to the construction of the new Huckleberry Hill School, at that time it was not renamed, Locating of the new library would be a reasonable, locating the new library there would be a reasonable use of that building. The Central School at Hawk City report given to the BOS in November of 2020 stated that the highest and best use for the soon-to-be vacated school property would be a new library. Now, it doesn't include Park and Rec in two of those options, right? An architect is needed to determine the cost involved with converting the building to a library and the different options available for renovating or demolishing the building and building it new. So that's where that came from, I'm sure.
That's for,
You know, it's,
Yes, that's the capital request we made that generated the $30,000.
And look, I'm not denying what we've already talked about, Christine and Betsy. I understand a library, as we understood it as children, is very, very different from what a library is today.
100%.
But the point here being that, you know, there is a need for a community space beyond just a traditional library. And I know that you guys understand that as well.
Which is what a new traditional library is.
Exactly.
If I could
Yep,
get up
and
on that,
I got you.
soapbox for just a second.
I'm with you, I get it.
Go to, Newtown now has a maker space. I was so excited when I walked in there the other day. Not the other day, it was pre my whole, anyway. About a month ago. But, other towns have libraries that are great examples of what libraries are today.
And other towns have great examples of what a Parks and Rec department is. Newtown has a wonderful
100%.
cooking class.
100%. But as a library board member, I'm here to talk to the library.
Gotcha.
right?
Follow the
Yeah.
lead.
So, okay.
So we have a path forward
Yes.
over the ensuing week. We'll wordsmith something.
Okay.
We'll send it to you guys. We'll get general consensus on how we, capture what we want to capture. Once we do that, we'll go out to the four shortlisted firms, and we'll reset this up. All right? And Harry, I'm thinking, we talked a little bit about the existing library. I'm thinking maybe a 3/4 scale indoor hockey rink.
We have an outdoor ice skating rink that they play hockey on, down at, Harrybrook.
Is it really,
Uh-huh.
right, open to the public?
I've not been.
Yes, it is.
All right.
I have a.
Harry, I'll see you on the ice.
I'm ready. I just gotta get my shoulder back in shape.
Oh, here we go. Excuses already. We have it in there. All right.
And-
Well, I thank everybody for their time and their commitment to this and moving this forward, and, Selectmen for having us this evening.
And thank you all for being here and for volunteering and for making Brookfield better with all that you do. I really, truly, honestly appreciate it.
Now, that being said, do we need a motion on this at all?
No,
No?
but I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. So,
If there's no other business, you don't need a motion.
if there is no other...
Hey, Chip Brown, all these years.
Oh, is that Robert Sewell?
Being there are no other business, the chairperson of the committee or the first selectman can adjourn the meeting.
Seeing as there is no other business,
Cut me off a little early there.